Hi everyone and welcome to Module 2. In this module, we're going to talk about tailoring your regulation practices for your individual context and your unique nervous system responses. Now, in the last session, we explored what regulation is, how the nervous system works, and why balance is essential both for your well-being and for your leadership. Now, today we're going to go a little bit deeper into the truth that regulation is not a one-size-fits-all practice. Every nervous system is going to carry its own unique history, and what feels calming to one person might actually agitate another. And this is why self-awareness is critical to this process. And so if we try to force ourselves into practices that don't fit our body or our context, then regulation can feel more like a chore than a resource that is going to help us. And so if we want this to be sustainable, we have to figure out what are the practices that work best for us in our different contexts, and we have to practice them enough that we see the benefit of actually implementing them. So in this module, we're going to talk about why tailoring is so important, how your lived experiences are going to shape your nervous system responses, and what you need to understand as a leader about the uniqueness of regulation. We're going to walk through a few examples. We will practice a method for identifying what works best for you, and we will reflect on how to start building a toolkit that is truly your own, that is fitted to your unique context, and that helps you in the different circumstances that you've defined as important for you. So, let's start by talking about why tailoring matters. Now, I want you to think about regulation like you might think about clothing, right? You wouldn't expect the same jacket to fit every person in every climate. And the same is true for our nervous system practices. Breathing deeply through the nose might feel grounding to one person, but it might also trigger discomfort in someone who has a trauma history or someone who had been suffocated by someone. And so we really have to be mindful, one, of the trauma experiences and how people are actually responding to the practices that we are practicing. Now, chanting is another thing, right? Chanting may be really soothing to someone who has a deep spiritual connection, and it might be comforting for them. But in that same context, if it's culturally unfamiliar, it might be really awkward for someone or for an individual. And so we have to be mindful of what are all of those contextual factors that come into play, and whether or not those practices are going to be helpful for you. Now, the nervous system is, it's sort of like an imprint of everything that has happened to you. So it is an automatic response that your body actually learns based on everything that you have lived and everything that you have experienced in your life. From trauma, from social and cultural conditioning, even to how you were actually soothed as a child. And these circumstances are going to shape what feels safe and what feels effective for you. And a little bit of a personal example, like I did not grow up in a family that hugged or that said I loved you or anything. And so I never had access to the touch and the physical aspects of co-regulating with other people. And so these were really, really foreign concepts to me when I first started on my journey. And the idea of another human being touching me did not sit well with me. And so, what are the unique circumstances that you have in your life that might prevent some of these practices from working for you? And caveat to that, of course, I have been able to work through many of my own traumas, and touch is one of my foundational elements now. And so just because a practice doesn't work for you now does not mean that it will not always work for you. And so as you progress on your journey, you'll want to revisit some of the practices that maybe didn't work in the past, but might better be able to suit you as you navigate your life and the circumstances that you're in. Now, I want to talk about as well how our nervous system actually shapes things for us, and also how tailoring our practices is going to allow us to honor all of those unique experiences. And so if we tailor the practices that we want to add into our lives and into our routines, then we can acknowledge all of those past traumas and all of those circumstances that have led us to where we are today, and bring that into our leadership. And what this is going to do is it's actually going to help you build better relationships and have stronger connections with other people. Because if you have kind of sorted through and and you understand these aspects and you're able to implement them for yourselves, then you are not only honoring that for yourself, but you also give other people permission to honor it for themselves as well. Now, let's talk about some individual differences that people might have. Now, there are many, many reasons why the nervous system is going to look different for each person. Some of these reasons are things like personal histories, cultural backgrounds, neurodiversity, the context of the situation. And when we are looking at regulating our nervous system, we have to take all of these things into account. So when we talk about personal history, what kinds of past traumas do you have, and how are they going to influence what you need and what you don't need as you are navigating the triggers that come up for you? It's also things like resilience building. How do you typically build your resilience? And what are your attachment patterns that you have? What are your ego responses? What are your emotional responses? Because all of these things are going to play a role in triggering our nervous system. And we have to be able to say, this is my ego telling me that I need to do this before other people, or I'm having an emotional reaction to this because of this experience that happened to me in my past. And now I have to tell my body that this situation is not that past experience, that I am not reliving that moment, that I am perfectly safe, and that I can make a conscious decision based on this circumstance in this environment. Now, things like our cultural background come into play when we think about, traditions of movement. And so was exercise a regular part of your life, whether it was walking or running or biking or anything along those lines? Because movement helps us release stored energy and release negative emotions from our body. And so if we had traditions of movement in our life, whether it was sports or athletics, whether it was yoga, whether it was qigong, like whatever those cultural traditions are, those are going to help us to, one, already know and understand how important these practices are in our lives, but then also to be able to know which ones will help and which ones won't help in certain circumstances. And of course, every cultural context is going to be different. And so, when I first started coming into this world, I thought yoga and chanting and meditation was like foo-foo stuff that I was never ever going to be into. And now it's such a massive part of my life. And so you never know in the beginning how your cultural background is going to influence your thoughts and your perceptions of these things. But if you do have cultural preferences, make sure that you do continuously try to come back to some of these, because again, your preferences will change over time and your needs will change over time. And neurodiversity is another area. And so some people have ADHD, some people have autism, some people have brain injuries or sensory sensitivities, and whatever kinds of neurodivergent tendencies that people have is going to impact whether or not certain practices are going to work for them or not work for them. And so what are your unique neurodivergent tendencies? How do they play into your ability to regulate or not regulate? And then build your practices around those things. So just because you have ADHD or irritability doesn't mean that you can't pause, pick a regulation practice, and then calm your nervous system, right? It just means that you have to find alternate ways of getting to those moments and alternate practices that are going to help you in those moments. And so for me, I developed some ADHD tendencies after some of my brain injuries. And, my brain is like a squirrel. It's all over the place. And sometimes I actually need lots of physical movement. And the only way that I can calm and regulate my nervous system is by running 10 miles. And so, whatever your unique tendencies are, if you know what they are and you know when you've reached your point of overwhelm, then you can say, okay, the only thing that is going to help me in this circumstance is this. I need to go do it, and then you can make time for whatever that is. And the last thing that we'll talk about for individual differences here is going to be the current context. Okay, so context matters in everything that we do. And so in your current context, whether that is a work context, whether that is a personal context, do you have access to safe spaces? Do you have access to nature? And do you have the ability to find time to just sit? And all of these things are going to vary based on your unique circumstances. And so an individual that I coach, she's got a couple of different kids. She's also the primary breadwinner for her family. And she finds it incredibly difficult between her work life and then her home life to be able to balance doing her work and her personal time with her kids, and then to also find time to sit. And so what she has to do is she has to say, these are the things that I have in my life. Here are the ways that I can find time to practice some of these things. And then she has to be intentional about doing those things. And so if you know the different cultural or contextual areas that are going to make it more difficult for you to practice, then you can actively plan around it. And I want to also say here that, a leader who expects everyone on their team to regulate in the same way is really risking creating an environment where people feel excluded and they don't feel like they can contribute in that environment. So what we have to do is we have to acknowledge for ourselves and for our team what are the diverse perspectives and circumstances that exist that are going to impact our ability to regulate. And if we can include different practices to support all of those different perspectives, then that is going to help us build inclusion and dignity and create authenticity amongst our teams so that we can have a better working relationship. Now, let's talk about leadership and how to tailor this to our leadership here. And so, as leaders, we have to be able to tailor two different dimensions. Well, probably more than two dimensions, but we're going to talk about the personal and the collective here. And so they have to personally know what their own regulation tools and needs are so that they can stay grounded. And collectively, they have to be able to recognize that their teams are going to have different sets of circumstances and regulation needs. And so for one person, going on a walk for a meeting might be energizing, but for another, it might be overstimulating and it might be too much for them. Or physically, they may not be able to do it. And so we have to be able to recognize what kinds of practices are going to work best for our team as much as for us. And then balance the two. So if I know that I need to have a walk in nature, but I have people on my team who don't have that need or that desire or can't physically do it, then I can take my walk before that meeting. So I come to that meeting with what I need, but my team still has everything that they need. And let's also say here that, when we talk about being inclusive in our leadership practices, we are talking about inviting curiosity. And so what helps you reset? What helps your team reset? And what practices feel supportive for you? And what practices feel supportive for your team? It's also about modeling, so openly sharing your own ways of regulating so that you give other people permission and also an example, a living example to kind of explore and to see how it helps. Now, I'm going to share a little bit of a personal story before we go on here. And so, I worked with someone who really provided a really interesting moment for me. And so this person prided themselves on always being composed. And she found herself snapping at her team during a moment of stress. And when I asked what it is that she did to kind of calm herself in that moment, she says, well, I just tell myself to breathe. But when we actually explored this a little bit further, she was able to realize that this specific breath practice was actually making her feel anxious. Her chest was tightening and it wasn't actually helping her regulate. It was doing the opposite for her. And we were able to actually experiment what is going to help her to regulate in that moment so that she doesn't snap at her team. And the thing that happened to work for her was movement. And so she realized that a short walk around the building, even just for 5 minutes, was able to shift her state more effectively than a breathing exercise. And so once she was able to accept that while breath work is really important and it works for many people, it wasn't her best tool. And she was then able to feel more empowered instead of frustrated because she was able to find the thing that worked best for her in her context, in her circumstance. Now, of course, her team also noticed this and her meetings became less tense, and her ability to pause before responding actually dramatically changed how she operated and how her team operated. Now, this person's story is just a single example of how recognizing your needs and tailoring your responses can make or break your leadership. And so if you find yourself trying to force yourself to practice breath work and it is making you anxious, then it's not doing what it's meant to do. So your role then is to recognize that it's not calming the nervous system and to figure out what other practice will help you in that circumstance so that you can be the leader that you want to be and that you need to be for your team. Now, let's move into an example. And so we're going to talk about building your map for your specific nervous system. And we're going to walk through a short practice so that you can start identifying what works best for you. And if you want, you're more than welcome to have a pen and paper nearby for this, to write down your thoughts. But to start, we're gonna go through it. We're gonna have an experiential moment, and then you can journal afterwards. Okay? So, first thing I want you to do, find a calm space, get centered, take your deep breath in and your slow exhale out. Notice your body. If there's any stress or tension there, release it with your exhale. And I want you to think about a recent moment where you felt overwhelmed. Whether it was anxiety or whether you just shut down, you couldn't respond. And I want you to think about how your body felt in that circumstance. Where did you feel it in your body? Was it in your stomach? Was it in your chest? Did you hold tension in your hands? Did you feel frozen, foggy, whatever? What did you feel in your body? And I want you to actually annotate it. I want you to say it out loud. I want you to write it down on paper. Whatever you need to do to commit to memory how your body felt in that moment. And then what I want you to do is I want you to identify what helped in that circumstance. Were you able to do anything in that moment that was able to shift your state? Maybe you took a walk, maybe you talked to someone, maybe you distracted yourself with music or something else. I want you to note what felt supportive and what was able to shift your state. And if you didn't, it's okay, we're going to get to that now. But if you did notice something, I want you to annotate it. And once you have that, I want you to think about what didn't help you in that circumstance. Did you try something that made you feel worse? You know, just like that breathing that caused anxiety. Did you try something and it did not go well for you? Did you maybe try to silence your mind? And then all of a sudden your mind just started racing more? Whatever happened, I want you to notice it and I want you to annotate it. Now I want you to consider the environmental context. Where were you? What was around you? What circumstances impacted that? Was it noise? Was it people? Was it light? And did any of those factors help or hinder your ability to self-regulate? And now I want to practice exploring a new tool. And this is going to be an experiential process. And with all of these things in mind that you just had, I want you to experience this tool. And then I want you to consider whether or not this tool might actually be helpful for you in the circumstance that you were in. And if it might not be so successful for you in that circumstance, are there other circumstances in which it might be helpful? But first, let's start. So we're going to experiment with a grounding practice, and this is called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you're going to name 5 things, you're going to notice 4 things, you're going to listen to 3 things, identify 2 things, and then notice something that you can taste. So we're going to walk through this. And I want you to look around and I want you to name 5 different things that you can see If you have sight, what can you see? 5 different things. For me, I am looking at my bicycle in front of me, and it's got all my bike locks and everything. I can see my coat rack, I can see my mirror and my door, all of these things. So I want you to notice 5 things in your environment, and I want you to really look at them. Now I want you to notice 4 things that you can actually feel. So I want you to touch things. I've got a desk here in front of me. It's made of wood. It's nice and smooth. And then I also have, my microphone here. It's got a gridded metal attachment to it. I've got my journal, my notebook in front of me. And so it's like a waxy paper kind of feel. And then I've got my coffee cup here. It's a nice ceramic. It's cold now because I've been recording, but I want you to notice 4 things that you can actually feel. If you don't have things in front of you like I do, then notice your feet on the ground or your hands on your lap. Actually touch your clothes. So I've got this bow tie. It's a really nice satin bow tie, and it contrasts with this not quite cotton, but also not linen blazer. And these things both have very distinct feels to them. Now I want you to listen to 3 things that you can hear. And technically I'm in complete silence here, but I can hear the humming of my computer. I can hear some background noise from one of the other apartments in my building. I can also hear a humming or a circular noise. Oh, maybe it's coming from my router. So, what are the noises that you hear? Now I want you to identify 2 things that you can smell. So for me, I am burning Palo Santo over in the corner there. And I also recently burned a incense stick. And so both of those smells are very potent in my environment right now. So what do you smell in your environment? And then finally, I want you to notice 1 thing that you can taste. For me, like I said, I've got my Earl Grey tea in front of me, and I love the taste of this. But if you don't have anything like that in front of you, maybe take a moment to just taste the residue in your mouth. For me, I have been drinking my Earl Grey tea, so I can still taste it in my mouth. But what is the taste in your mouth? Or what is the taste of something in your environment? And what this technique does is it helps to anchor you in the present moment. It helps to shift your attention away from whatever racing thoughts that you have, any anxiety about the future or the past, and it helps to hone your attention to the present moment so that you can see and hear and smell and experience this moment. And what that does is it helps to ground and calm your nervous system, because you're not worrying about the future or the past. You're in this moment experiencing what's happening for you. Now, what I want you to do now is I want you to check in with your body after this experience. And what kinds of things do you notice in your body after doing this? Specifically, how does your body feel after doing this exercise? And we're going to move into some reflection prompts for this one. So, what are the practices that you've been able to use in the past to find balance? And did they actually work for you? Or were you just forcing yourself to do it because you either thought that you should or someone told you that you should? So what are the practices you've used, and did they actually work for you or not? Then I want you to explore, what are the signals that your body gives you when a practice is working for you versus when it isn't. So we shared a little bit about the breathing example earlier. If the breathwork technique that you've chosen actually causes anxiety for you in your body, then you want to be able to recognize that. And so what are the signals that your body gives you when a practice is working versus when it is not working? Being able to discern which practices work and which practices don't work, and what signals your body gives you to tell you whether it's working or not, is a very important part of this process. So take a couple of moments to think about that one. And the last reflection prompt that we'll go with here is, actually we'll do two more. So let's do a leadership prompt. And so as a leader, how can you make space for your team to explore their own regulation strategies? So again, you have to do the work first, but then in the team context, how can you help your team explore their own regulation practices and strategies? And then what environmental adjustments would help you or your team to regulate better? And so if there are environmental or contextual components that will help you or your team, what are they? Now, if you find that you want to journal right now, pause this video and you can come back for the closing close out of this module. But if you don't want to, we'll continue going on. But if you do, please do take the moment, pause the video, journal your thoughts, any insights that you had that came to you, and make sure that you are keeping that information handy as we go throughout the remainder of this course. Now, to close this out here, regulation is not about having a specific formula that is going to work for you every time. This is about having an experiential practice where you can listen to your body, you can honor what it needs, and you can make decisions based on what you previously have known to be true about what your body needs and what your mind needs in those contexts. And again, every person's circumstance is going to be unique. For one person, their breath might be their anchor. For another, it might be movement, it might be sound, it might be touch, or it might be something else altogether. The more that you can experiment and the more that you can discover what works for you and what doesn't work for you, the better toolkit you will be able to create for yourself. And what I mean by toolkit here is sets of practices that you already know work for you in certain circumstances or don't work for you in certain circumstances, so that as you're experiencing all of these things and as your body is being triggered, you already know, when I am in a meeting and I have someone contradict me or question my X, Y, and Z, I know that I can do this, right? That is what we mean by developing your toolkit. So, in the next module, we're going to dive into some breath-based practices, and we're going to help you to learn why breath is so important and why it's one of the most powerful tools for regulation. We're going to explore several different techniques. So even if you've tried many different breathing techniques and they didn't work for you, we're going to go through a whole gamut of different breathing techniques that have different practical applications, different purposes, and that are going to help you experience how your breath can be a foundational tool for you. And so with that, I hope that you will all join me in Module 3 for breath-based regulation. See you soon, everyone.